In the autumn of 1757, Frederick II of Prussia sits down to write what he believes may be his last letter. His army has just been destroyed at the Battle of Kolin. His invasion of Bohemia has collapsed, and the forces of Austria, France, Russia, Sweden, and the Holy Roman Empire are converging on Prussia from every direction. He carries a capsule of poison in his pocket. He has been carrying it for months. In the letter, he instructs his generals on how to conduct the defense of Prussia after his death, specifies that he is to receive no ceremonial funeral if he falls in battle, and observes that he is fighting a war against three of the greatest powers in the world simultaneously, and that the mathematical probability of survival is, at this moment, essentially zero. He survives. Prussia survives. At the end of 7 years of continuous warfare against a coalition whose combined population is roughly 20 times that of Prussia, whose combined military and financial resources exceed Prussia's by margins that should make the outcome of the conflict obvious before it begins, Frederick II negotiates a peace that leaves Prussia in possession of every inch of territory it held when the war started. He does not merely survive an impossible war. He ends it without concessions. The conventional explanation for this outcome is Frederick's military genius, the oblique order attacks, the rapid concentration of force, the aggressive battlefield initiative that converts numerical disadvantage into tactical surprise. The military genius is real, and it matters. But it is not sufficient to explain how a kingdom of 2.5 million people fights 7 years against coalitions commanding the resources of France, Austria, Russia, and Sweden, and emerges with its territorial integrity intact. The explanation requires looking at three things that military history tends to underweight: the economic value of the province that started the war, the British financial subsidy that kept Prussia solvent while its enemies spent themselves into exhaustion, and the diplomatic accident that ended the conflict at the precise moment when Prussian resistance was genuinely about to break. Frederick inherits the Prussian throne in May 1740 from his father, Frederick William I, who has spent his reign building one of the most extraordinary military fiscal states in European history. Prussia in 1740 is not a great power by any conventional measurement. Its territory is fragmented, a collection of disconnected provinces scattered across northern Germany and eastern Prussia, without the geographic coherence that gives France or Austria their strategic depth. Its population of roughly 2.5 million is smaller than the city of Paris. Its agricultural base is thin, the sandy soils of Brandenburg producing modest yields that require the most intensive administrative extraction to fund the army that Frederick William has made the centerpiece of Prussian state identity. What Frederick William builds is a fiscal system of extraordinary efficiency, a state apparatus in which military expenditure consumes roughly 80% of government revenue, and in which that revenue is extracted from a population through a combination of excise taxes on consumption, military conscription that eliminates the cost of hiring mercenaries for much of the army's rank and file, and an officer corps drawn from the Junker nobility class, whose economic survival depends on military careers and who therefore identify their personal interests with the state's military performance. The canton system that Frederick William introduces in 1733 is the fiscal military innovation that makes the Prussian army possible without bankrupting the state. Each regiment is assigned a specific geographic canton from which it draws its recruits, reducing the cost of recruitment by eliminating the competitive bidding for manpower that drives up mercenary wages in every other European army. The Junker landlords who serve as regimental officers are simultaneously the employers and landlords of the men they command, creating a relationship of authority that extends from the battlefield into the agricultural economy of the estate. binding officer and soldier together through economic dependency that no other army in Europe has institutionalized at this scale. The canton system produces soldiers who are cheaper, more disciplined, and more reliably available than mercenaries. And it produces them continuously because the agricultural population of Brandenburg, Prussia, is available for military service in ways that the populations of wealthier, more commercially developed states are not. Frederick William I leaves his son an army of 80,000 men, larger in absolute numbers than the armies of states with 5 times Prussia's population, and a treasury surplus of 8 million thalers accumulated through 2 decades of careful fiscal management. He leaves him a military instrument looking for a war to fight. The war arrives 4 months after Frederick's accession, in the form of an opportunity. The Habsburg Emperor Charles VI dies in October 1740, leaving the throne to his daughter Maria Theresa under the terms of the Pragmatic Sanction, a succession document that the major European powers have formally guaranteed. The question of whether those guarantees will hold in practice when tested by the reality of a young woman on the throne of an empire that has been under continuous military pressure is answered almost immediately by Frederick. He sends his army into Silesia in December 1740 without a declaration of war, without a formal legal pretext, and without any pretense that he is doing anything other than seizing the most economically valuable province of the Habsburg Empire, while its new ruler is too weak to resist. Silesia is the reason for everything that follows. It is not merely territory, it is the most industrially productive region of Central Europe, its textile industry generating output that rivals anything in Western Europe, its linen and wool production supplying markets from Russia to the Mediterranean, its silver mines contributing revenue that dwarfs the fiscal yield of equivalent areas of Prussia's existing territory. Silesia adds something in the range of 40% to Prussia's total productive capacity, transforming a second-tier German state into a genuinely significant European power with the industrial and fiscal base to sustain the military establishment that Frederick William has built. Frederick understands this arithmetic perfectly. The invasion of Silesia is not an adventure. It is a calculated economic acquisition, and he pursues it with the focused determination of a man who has done the numbers and knows what the province is worth. The War of Austrian Succession, which the Silesian aggression triggers, runs from 1740 to 1748 and ends with Prussia keeping Silesia under the Treaty of Dresden in 1745. Maria Theresa never accepts this outcome. She spends the following decade systematically rebuilding Austrian military capacity, reforming the Habsburg fiscal system, and most importantly, executing what becomes known as the Diplomatic Revolution of 1756, the most consequential realignment of European alliance politics in a century. Austria abandons its traditional alliance with Britain and concludes a defensive alliance with France, the power that has been Austria's primary rival for 2 centuries. France, seeking to contain British commercial and colonial expansion, accepts. Russia, threatened by Prussian military power on its western frontier and governed by Empress Elizabeth, who has developed a personal animosity toward Frederick, joins the coalition. Sweden joins for its own northern German territorial interests. Saxony joins because its territory provides the most direct route into Prussia from the south. Britain, left without its traditional Austrian ally and facing a French coalition that threatens British commercial interests from North America to India, concludes an alliance with Prussia, not from any particular admiration for Frederick, but from the cold calculation that a Prussian threat to French territory in Europe will constrain French military resources that would otherwise be available for the colonial conflicts where the real British strategic interests lie. The Convention of Westminster, signed in January 1756, commits Britain to paying Prussia an annual subsidy of £670,000 sterling, a sum that represents, at the exchange rates of the period, a significant fraction of Prussia's total annual military expenditure, and that will increase substantially as the war intensifies. The 7 Years' War begins in August 1756, with Frederick's preemptive invasion of Saxony, a move that he calculates will delay the coalition's assembly while providing Prussia with Saxon military resources and Saxon territory as a forward position. The calculation is correct tactically and disastrous diplomatically. The invasion of a neutral state without declaration of war confirms every charge his enemies have made about Prussian aggressive intentions and consolidates the coalition against him more firmly than anything else he could have done. By the spring of 1757, Prussia faces coordinated military pressure from every direction simultaneously. The military campaign that Frederick conducts between 1757 and 1762 is, at the purely tactical level, genuinely extraordinary. A sustained demonstration of the capacity to defeat numerically superior opponents through aggressive initiative, rapid concentration of force, and the willingness to accept battlefield risk that more cautious commanders would consider irresponsible. The Battle of Rossbach in November 1757, where Frederick destroys a French and imperial army twice his size in under 2 hours through a feigned retreat followed by a devastating cavalry strike from an unexpected angle, is perhaps the most efficient military victory of the 18th century. The Battle of Leuthen 1 month later, where he defeats the main Austrian army on its chosen ground using the oblique order attack that concentrates overwhelming force against one end of the enemy line while the rest holds, is the performance that military academies across Europe will study for the following century. But Rossbach and Leuthen are the victories. The defeats are equally instructive about the nature of what Prussia is actually doing between 1757 and 1762. At Kolin in June 1757, Frederick attacks an Austrian army in a prepared defensive position and loses a third of his force. At Hochkirch in October 1758, an Austrian force surrounds a Prussian camp in the early morning and destroys it before Frederick can organize a defense, a failure of basic military security that results in the loss of 9,000 men and most of his artillery. At Kunersdorf in August 1759, he attacks a combined Russian and Austrian army and suffers the worst defeat of his career, losing 43% of his engaged force in a single afternoon. After Kunersdorf, he writes to his minister in Berlin that everything is lost and instructs him to negotiate the best available peace terms. He has, at this moment, roughly 18,000 men remaining of the force he committed to the engagement. The days after Kunersdorf are the closest Frederick comes to genuine psychological collapse. He rides through what remains of his army counting survivors, issuing orders that his staff later describe as disconnected from any coherent operational plan, writing letters that oscillate between lucid military analysis and something approaching despair. He is 47 years old, has been campaigning continuously for 3 years, has lost in a single afternoon the army it took him 6 months to rebuild after the previous year's losses, and is facing the realistic prospect that the Russian and Austrian forces that have just destroyed his army will march on Berlin and end the Prussian state within the month. The poison capsule is in his pocket. He does not take it. The reason he does not take it is not courage, or not courage alone. It is the same cold calculation that has governed every decision of his career. There is still a war to fight. There is still a chance, however small, that the coalition will fail to coordinate its follow-up. And Frederick, who has built his entire career on exploiting the failures of opponents who should have been able to defeat him, is not yet ready to concede that no such failure will come. Peace negotiations do not happen because the coalition, having won the greatest tactical victory of the war, fails to pursue. The Russian and Austrian commanders disagree about the next move. Their supply lines are stretched, and the coordination that a decisive follow-up would require does not materialize before Frederick has scraped together a new force and placed it between the coalition and Berlin. The moment passes. Frederick recovers enough military coherence to prevent the immediate fall of the Prussian capital, and the campaign season ends with Prussia battered but unbroken. The fiscal dimension of Prussian survival is the factor that military narratives of the 7 Years' War most consistently underweight. Prussia's ability to continue fighting across 7 years of warfare against coalitions with dramatically superior resources depends on 3 interconnected fiscal mechanisms. The first is the British subsidy, which by 1758 has risen substantially above the original £670,000 per year and continues through the war, providing approximately a quarter of Prussia's military expenditure in the war's most intense years. The subsidy is the price Britain pays for Frederick's army, tying down French military resources in Europe, while British forces defeat France in Canada, India, and the Caribbean, the global dimension of the 7 Years' War that the European campaigns are simultaneously obscuring and enabling. The second fiscal mechanism is the systematic exploitation of occupied territory. Prussia administers Saxony throughout most of the war, extracting forced contributions, conscripting Saxon soldiers into the Prussian army, and stripping Saxon resources with an efficiency that generates substantial revenue, while simultaneously generating the resentment that makes Saxony a permanent enemy. Prussian forces in Mecklenburg, in parts of Pomerania, and in whatever Austrian or imperial territory they temporarily occupy, apply similar extraction mechanisms, turning military presence into fiscal resource in ways that most 18th century armies consider beneath their dignity. Frederick has no such inhibitions. The third mechanism is the internal Prussian fiscal system that extracts excise taxes from Prussian consumption with a thoroughness that the population finds oppressive and that Frederick's ministers consider barely sufficient. The Prussian peasantry and urban workers are taxed at rates that consume a significant fraction of their income, and the military service obligations of the Prussian nobility are enforced without the exemptions and substitutions that make noble military service in France and Austria largely voluntary. The Prussian military fiscal state is not merely efficient, it is genuinely extractive in ways that peacetime political arrangements could not sustain, and it sustains them only because the alternative, Prussian defeat and the dissolution of the state, is immediately present and universally understood. By 1761, the situation is genuinely desperate. The British subsidy is reduced as the new British government under Lord Bute seeks to disengage from the Continental War and concentrate on consolidating the colonial gains that the war has produced elsewhere. Prussia's manpower reserves, after 6 years of intensive warfare, are approaching exhaustion. The Prussian army is increasingly filled with deserters from the armies of its opponents, prisoners of war who accept Prussian service as the alternative to imprisonment, and recruits drawn from occupied territories with minimal loyalty to the Prussian cause. Frederick's own health is deteriorating. The physical and psychological strain of 7 years of continuous campaigning, of sleeping in the field, of managing a multi-front war with inadequate resources through repeated tactical failures, has aged him visibly beyond his 49 years. He writes in 1761 that he does not see how Prussia can survive another campaign year. He is not being rhetorical. The military mathematics of the coalition's resources against Prussia's remaining capacity genuinely do not add up in Prussia's favor, and Frederick knows military mathematics better than any other commander in Europe. What saves Prussia is not a battle. It is a death. Empress Elizabeth of Russia dies on the 5th of January, 1762, and is succeeded by her nephew, Peter III, a man whose military hero is Frederick the Great, and whose first significant act as emperor is to withdraw Russia from the war against Prussia, return all Russian territorial conquests at no cost, and offer Frederick a military alliance against Denmark. The withdrawal of Russia from the coalition collapses the coordinated military pressure that has been keeping Prussia on the defensive on multiple fronts simultaneously. With the Russian threat on the Eastern Front eliminated, Frederick can concentrate his remaining forces against Austria and achieve, not victory, but the military stalemate that makes a negotiated peace possible. The Peace of Hubertusburg, signed in February 1763, ends the 7 Years' War in Europe, with every territorial boundary restored to its pre-war position. Prussia keeps Silesia. Austria keeps everything else. 7 years of warfare across all of Central Europe, at a cost in lives and treasure that historians have never fully calculated, produces a European map identical to the one that existed before it started, with one critical difference. Prussia, which was the aggressor, which was the smaller power, which was surrounded and outnumbered and outspent and very nearly destroyed on at least 2 separate occasions, has demonstrated that it can fight the great powers of Europe to a standstill. What Frederick the Great's impossible war demonstrates, more clearly than almost any other conflict in European history, is that military genius and political will are necessary but not sufficient conditions for great power survival. Prussia survives the 7 Years' War because 3 other conditions happen to align simultaneously. A British ally who needs Prussia's army to tie down French resources and is willing to pay for the service, a fiscal system efficient enough to extract maximum revenue from minimum population, and a random biological event, the death of a Russian empress at precisely the right moment that eliminates the military threat that no amount of tactical brilliance could have addressed. Remove any one of these 3 factors, and the military genius that fills the history books becomes the record of a brilliant commander who lost everything to an imbalance of resources too large to overcome. The miracle of the House of Brandenburg is not, at its foundation, a military miracle. It is a fiscal, diplomatic, and biological one.